Hey guys, this is your old buddy RG here. I was originally going to go and compile a bunch of articles. I didn't really see a point though, because this is just very obvious, and as with a lot of these things, this is an observation. Just whenever one of these happen, just pay attention and look at some of the titles of the articles and what they say in them, and this should be pretty straightforward. So this is on, at no point in my lifetime has the left ever accepted the results of an election. Now, for me, not accepting the results of the election is fine because I don't believe in democracy. So I don't have a commitment to the voice of the people. I just don't. I mean, if the left wins an election, I would be perfectly happy with a military coup just removing them from power and having a authoritarian government. So I don't support it, so me not accepting the results of an election isn't hypocritical. When you base your entire existence and you constantly talk about the will of the people and democracy, and you say that that's what you stand for, not accepting the results of an election is a big deal. And I can't think of an election in my lifetime that the left has accepted. Now, what do I mean by accepted? Well, it can mean a couple things. The first one is they won't accept that a majority of people will vote for something. Depending on how the electoral system is, sometimes it won't be a majority, it'll just be a plurality. Like, let's look at Toronto for a second. In the 2010 mayoral election, Rob Ford won with 47% of the vote in a three-person race. Second place got 35% of the vote. So he won a clear plurality, verging on a majority. It was, however, not accepted by anyone. From day one, I recall there was a lawyer or some activists who stated, "We will not allow Rob Ford to finish his term in office." And they immediately began efforts to remove him from office. The police followed him around. Various people spied on him. They tried to entrap him a number of times. When there was any hint that he had done something wrong, particularly near the end, they tried to bring in legal charges. There was constant lawsuits. No one accepted the results of his election. I remember he was elected back when I was still in university, and the first day he was elected, my professor said this election doesn't count. Despite the fact that people voted, and they clearly voted for Rob Ford, my professors were saying the next day he has to be removed from office. When Stephen Harper won a couple elections, the left in Canada immediately said it's illegitimate, it doesn't count. So what they did, I remember, is there was one or a couple incidences of robocalls, maybe giving false information on where to vote in one riding. So the left said, well, that happened, so that means the entire election's irrelevant. Stephen Harper obviously rigged the election. We need a new election. And when he won the next election, they also said that's illegitimate, it doesn't count. And they will riot and, in Canada's case, burn shit and destroy stores, claiming that the undemocratic government has to be removed. But they won the election. A majority of people voted for them, and they'll say, well, they don't represent Canada. Now, I don't like democracy. I don't really care if they represent Canada or not. I want them to do what I want them to do. But these people are rioting because the government which the people of Canada chose in an election is in their view, not democratic and not legitimate because it doesn't follow the will of the people, even though the people chose it. Are you following? No. So, yeah, it's never legitimate. People talk about Mike Harris and how he was a tyrant. Well, he won two huge majorities. People say Brian Mulroney wasn't legitimate, but he won the largest share of the largest landslides in Canadian history. Reagan won one of the largest landslides. He carried 49 states. But the left did not accept his election. They don't accept it to this day. George Bush won two elections in a legal fashion. You can say what you want about Florida. You can say that the system didn't work, but when it's all considered, he won through legal means. And John Kerry wanted to do a selective recount that would have resulted in his victory. Also, the governor of Florida had signed the electoral college thing validating it that he won. So you can say, well, that's not fair. That's not a good system. Well, okay, but that's just the way it is. That's how the law works. If you want to change it, that's fine. But you can't criticize people for doing what's legally required of them, and then say, well, it's their bias for implementing the rules that are on paper. Well, maybe they are, but it doesn't mean that they didn't win. And then Bush won re-election. If Romney had beat Obama, do you think the left would have accepted it? No, they would have come up with conspiracy theories. People didn't even have conspiracy theories for Rob Ford. I never actually heard a real argument for why he was illegitimate besides the fact that they disagreed with him. The National Front is currently winning in France, and people are saying they're illegitimate. We have to stop them. They are dangerous to France. Well, that may be true or not, but the French people voted for them. The French people continue to vote for them. So the idea is, well, that they're not allowed to vote against left-wing policies. I saw a number of people who talked about the Polish election. They're like, well, Poland is in danger of becoming undemocratic. Poland is under the sway of right-wing governments, and something has to be done. Okay, but the Polish people voted for that. They went to the polls. I didn't see any real accusations that they rigged it. I don't really care if they did or not, but I don't see any real accusations that it didn't happen. I mean, we've been having polls for like years, and they showed that that's pretty much what was going to happen, and they won. So then they say, well, I don't like the right, so that election doesn't count. Only elections where my party wins are legitimate. And as I said, I'm fine with that personally because I don't believe in democracy. So whatever it takes to remove the left from power, be it a military coup, be it manipulating the election system, I'm okay with. But I don't pretend that my entire ideology is based on the will of the people. And the will of the people in this minimalist vote every 4 years way amidst an environment where everybody's just full of shit. So they didn't accept Harper winning. They didn't accept Rob Ford winning. They didn't accept George Bush winning. And you can see this in how they riot. It's not just that they protest the government, but they riot, and the explicit slogans will be, this government is illegitimate. Well, then what government would be legitimate? To me, it would be a right-wing government would be legitimate. But as I said, I don't care about democracy. I don't support democracy, so it doesn't really matter if I don't accept the results of elections. These people are like, well, we need democracy, we need people power, we need rule by the people. But whenever the people vote, they're against it. And they'll say, well, what about first past the post system? Okay, well, fair enough. Maybe you can be against first past the post. But do they ever complain when first past the post results in their candidates winning? No, I don't recall anyone complaining when Tony Blair won a couple terms. No one was calling for a change to that. I don't recall anyone complaining that first past the post gave Justin Trudeau a majority, or that the Electoral College gave Obama a majority. No one complained about that. So it's bullshit. Once again, I personally would prefer whatever electoral system means that my guys win the most. But as I said, I don't care about democracy. They bring out the argument for for proportional, that it's more democratic and it better represents the people, and that they support democracy and they support this other stuff, but they don't imply it universally. They only apply it in a certain context. I remember when the EU elections happened and the far right won a bunch of seats, there was immediate calls that this is a disaster. This is bad. No one accepted the results. No one accepts that UKIP won a substantial percentage of the vote. No one accepts the rise of the right-wing populism in Europe. If I recall, I don't think the left in Australia accepted when Tony Abbott won the election either. But no, my point is, at no point in my life has the left ever accepted the result of an election. They never accept that the will of the people chose someone other than them. And they immediately, in almost all cases, attempt to overturn the results of the election by making stuff up, taking small cases of electoral irregularity, which are really electoral irregularities, because all parties do these things in all countries. You think the left doesn't do this stuff? Of course they do. They probably do it more. Given some very basic facts we know, like their opposition to voter ID laws, their opposition to purging the rolls of dead people, there's a lot of electoral irregularities. I think there's a couple districts in America where 100% of the people voted for Obama, which is statistically pretty much impossible. But those don't count. So they'll cherry pick a couple isolated incidents and saying the whole election doesn't count, we have to keep having an election until our guys win. But it's not about that, it's about democracy. If they would just say, we don't care about democracy, we think that the best interests of this country would be served by left-wing governments and socialism, and we will keep holding re-elections, and we will keep trying to remove our opponents until we gain power, I actually wouldn't even mind that. That's at least honesty. I hate dishonesty more than I really hate just about anything else. I wish they would just say that. I remember whenever austerity comes up, they're like, well, austerity is undemocratic. Austerity is the government's war with the people. But in most cases, parties get elected on that platform. They'll run and they'll say, look, if we get elected, we're going to have to impose austerity. And it's a decision up to you, the people. And you can vote for whoever you want. And they'll be like, well, the people didn't know what they were voting for. So like they're like, well, we support the people. We think the people are supreme. We want to do everything to empower the people. But when the people express that power, we're against it. And we think it's a bad thing. And we oppose their right to vote except if they vote for us, but we're in favor of voting. It's a bit like how they're pro-choice, but they're against choice in every case other than the right to kill the unborn. Or the born in many cases as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's a couple examples, and this applies at all levels of government. It's only a re-election that the left wins, despite the fact that they support democracy fanatically, and they claim in all cases. And whenever they lose, they riot. And the reason for rioting isn't that they disagree, and I think that's very important to keep in mind. It's not that they disagree, it's that they believe that the will of the people is on their side. They believe that the will of the people has delegitimized the government, even when people didn't vote for them. So they really take this view that the people are too ignorant to control their own future, but that everyone should vote, which is kind of like how the various totalitarian states ran. They'd have elections, and this is how Cuba works, but there'd only be one name on the ballot. So by that logic, it would be legitimate. And this is kind of the strange thing, because they don't accept that Hitler or Mussolini or any of these other guys won elections. That's not legitimate because they weren't left-wing. Actually, the Bolsheviks didn't win the election. They only got like a quarter of the votes or something like that. But the elections where they elected left-wing people are okay, but where they elected right-wing people, they're not okay. I remember Franco even said, our regime is backed with bayonets and blood, not fake elections. So he was at least honest about it. He's like, look, I don't support democracy. Democracy sucks. I'm just going to rule this country and I'm going to do what I think is good for Spain. Fuck your elections. I'm not even going to bother rigging them. I'm not even going to bother having fake elections and then rigging them. So that's an important point to keep in mind. The left never accepts elections. Just keep an eye open for it. You don't have to take my word for it. Just think about it a bit and think back to how they react to every time they lose an election. This is Argent Templar signing out.